What's going on, everybody? Sean Pierce Johnson here, bringing you this week's edition of Stompbox Saturday. And on the Stompin' Block today, we have the Dark Side Workstation by Keeley Electronics. If you're not familiar with the Keeley Workstation series, basically what they do is they kind of cram a bunch of effects into one fairly pedalboard friendly enclosure and allow you to select from many different types of effects. And one of the things that they've been doing is been taking certain guitar heroes, from Hendrix to now David Gilmour, and kind of condensing their tones down into the essential effects. Now, of course, with a name like Dark Side, we're getting after the tones of Dark Side of the Moon, the unbelievable album by Pink Floyd, with some of the best guitar solos and guitar tones that I've ever heard. So let's take a look at the pedal and see exactly what it's going to get us. Let's start by checking out this fuzz that's on the Dark Side. And the cool thing is there's 3 different voicings to it. Let's hear that fuzz with all knobs first at noon, and then we'll start turning things to see how they're so different. First one, scoop. Center position is full. You're going to get a little bit more mid-range out of this, and it's going to sound a little, well, fuller. Almost has a fuzz face kind of vibe in that setting. And then you have flat, where it's just kind of a nice, even response across the board. So there you have 3 different voicings, which is great if you want to use it with different types of amplifiers. Personally, the way that Gilmour used his was he, of course, had that famous scooped mid-range from the Big Muff into his loud high watts, which had a lot of mid-range to it. And my orange, it's got quite a bit of mid-range to it too. So what I like to do is run the scoop fuzz with a little bit more high end to it, so I'm turning the filter knob on it just up to about, maybe 1-2 o'clock on the dial, and add a little bit more gain than 50% and leaving the level right at 50%. And for me, I find that when it comes to a Strat, it works really well. And of course, we can go ahead and bump up the level a little bit. I think we can get away with it. Now let's check out this fuzz with the normal guitar you always see me playing, my trusty Les Paul Studio. Seems like a mammoth storm. Let's go to flat. So now that we've taken a look at the fuzz sounds that you can get out of the Dark Side, let's take a look at some of these cool modulation sounds. Now, the left side has 5 different effects that you can choose from. In the center position on the toggle switch, you have the delay, which basically replicates the Benson Echo Rec. You have on the left side a choice between flanger and rotary, and then on the right position you have selection between a phaser and a Univibe. Now, the flanger and rotary are 2 of my personal favorites. I actually think that the modulation stuff on the Dark Side is really, really, really nice. Really well done and a lot of fun to play around with. The flanger is one of my favorites, and of course I should mention, to get between those 2 sounds, what's really cool is you turn the blend knob. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to get the flanger at full counterclockwise and the rotary at full clockwise. And you can actually blend between the effects in between. So the flanger, really cool, based on the electric Mistress that David Gilmour used during the Dark Side of the Moon era. And it is just a very, very lush sounding flange tone. got that very 70s liquid flange kind of tone, which is pretty cool if you want to try to get, let's say, medium depth, slow on the rate, turn up the level, get a little bit crunchy. This may be too crunchy. I think I'll turn down the gain a little bit. And if you play your cards right, look who you can sound like. But I think that the rotary is another big time, like, unsung hero of this pedal. And what's really cool is running the fuzz into the rotary kind of gets you this nifty B3 into a Marshall stack kind of tone. I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna go ahead, take the rotary, so I've got the knob full clockwise. Turn the depth knob up all the way and get a nice fast rate going. Now I'm going to go ahead and kick on that flat fuzz setting, and we have something that sounds a little bit like this. Alright, let's check out the other modulation effects, the phase and the Univibe. We'll start with the Univibe, which is probably one of the chewiest, gnarliest, throbbiest Univibe sounds I have ever come across. Now, the phaser that this one seeks to replicate is basically that classic orange phaser we all know and love, and that Gilmour used to great effect on Dark Side of the Moon for that nice, slow sweep and a little bit of watery movement. And what's really cool is because you have more control over that tone, you can back off the depth, turn up the rate, and get a faster sound that maybe is just a little bit more subtle. You can kind of hear that crazy warble underneath the chords, but because we're able to turn the depth down, it's more of just an underlying effect rather than taking over the whole sound. Alright, time to check out the delay part of the modulation, which of course is that infamous rotating drum Benson echo rec. Now, units like this are very few and far between, and they command a high price tag if vintage, so you have a pretty good representation of that in the Dark Side Workstation. Now, what's cool about the Echo Rec is it had 4 tape heads that you could select what ones you wanted to play back in the echo signal. Some of the sounds that you can create with the Dark Side weren't available on the original units, so yippee, more sounds, which means more fun for us guitar players. So let's check out a couple of those settings. And what's really nifty about the Keeley is, of course, with a nod to Dark Side of the Moon, you have a color-coded tape head ring around the tape head knob. Now, this particular setting I find works really well for that another brick in the wall kind of rhythmic delay pattern. I'll show you what I mean. And it's very cool how when you listen to the repeats, the different playback heads decay over time. So the ones that go further, those will take longer to die off than the ones that immediately sound out, which is really cool. One of the ones that I find really trippy and really fun is, of course, the very last setting, and that has all 4 playback heads running one right after the other. And things can get pretty hairy pretty quick. So let's just have some fun and see what kind of stuff we can come up with. This is what I've done, just increasing the delay time completely and at that all 4 playback head setting. Let's go with 1 repeat and hear how that sounds. That's what you get. So let's turn up the feedback. I'm just gonna hit a note. Well, that might be some fun if we come up with something we can play over that. I could picture that sounding really cool as kind of a wash. So let's turn back the level, increase the feedback, and let's find a setting that will be kind of a wash. Well, there you have it, everybody. There is your look at the new Dark Side Workstation from Keeley Electronics. Man, I knew when I saw this thing was coming out, I had to get one and plug into it, and I am so happy that I did. It is exactly what I hoped it would be. It definitely gets you the sounds that Gilmour got on Dark Side of the Moon, but at the same time, it's capable of finding sounds that you would want to use in your own music. And unfortunately, no, fortunately, I like writing my own music. It's a lot of fun for me. But I can't wait to see what kind of sounds that I'll be able to use in my music by using the Dark Side. But hey, that's just me. Let me know what you guys thought. Shoot me a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned for next week's episode of Stompbox Saturday. And until then, my friends, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, and I wish you great tone and happy stomping. Cheers.